have not met. I'm the Director for Arts and Cultural Partnerships for University Outreach and Engagement. And I'm very, very pleased to have you join us today for this, what is the beginning of a new series that we're going to be offering through University Outreach and Engagement that I'm helping coordinate and develop, called Creative Conversations, Creating Equitable Arts and Cultural Community Engagement Partnerships. And I'm going to be doing a series of panels. This first one is focusing on the visual arts. And I might just say that there's just such a growing interest in using arts and humanities in so many innovative ways to work with communities and give voice to communities, respond to communities' needs, and to do it in a way that is reciprocally conceived, mutually beneficial, and hopefully equitable. So today we're going to be talking, I've invited some special guests to talk about that. I just want to say a few other things that are important for you. We are going to try to have a conversation toward the end of these three brief presentations. We decided not to do breakout rooms because we really want everybody to take advantage and have access to all three of our speakers today. And also, we want it to be conversational. So to make that happen, we're going to encourage you to put your questions in the chat so that our presenters can see those questions. I will serve as the moderator and try to call people out. You can chime in on your, I may call on you to share your question, or they can take it. We're going to ask for kind of brief questions, and we'll try to keep the responses concise too. They may cross over and others may want to respond to it as well. So it's conversational is what we're hoping to have today. And I will just say a word about our presenters. They were selected for their exemplary work in creating equitable community engaged partnerships. They're admired by their peers for their work, and all of them have used visual arts in very innovative ways here, I would say. What's interesting about it, when I was trying to put this together and talking to colleagues, I wanted to get a balance of different kinds of community engaged work in arts and the humanities. So it's interesting as you look at the three panelists today's, their presentations, we'll be hearing about an international partnership, a national and state partnership, one with a sovereign nation, and also what we're also looking at connections across campus too. Both university museums will be represented here, the Residential College of Arts and Humanities, as well as the College of Arts and Letters and the Department of Art History and Design. The partners in this particular case will be presenting. They all have done work, more than one project, mind you, in their lifetimes. So I've asked them to focus on one particular project in particular for today, kind of a case study. They're going to highlight that case study, talk about how that partnership was developed. They'll share their lessons learned in creating equitable, community engaged partnerships in the visual arts. And just to get us started right away, I'm going to turn to, and I'm not going to, I will say, I decided not to do long introductions. Each one of these people would be a 5-minute introduction. So I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves. You've all seen photos of them on the promotional materials and know a bit of their affiliation, but we're going to start with Guillermo. And Guillermo, please introduce yourself and make yourself comfortable in this conversation.
Thank you, Kurt, and thank you everyone for attending this morning. So I am Guillermo Delgado, and I'm the academic specialist in community and socially engaged arts at the college, the Residential College in the Arts and Humanities. We call it ARCA, so if you hear me say ARCA, that's what it means. So I've been working with incarcerated communities for about 8 years, but before I continue, am I okay on sound, folks? Yeah? All right, cool. Excuse me. I just came out from the outdoors, so and you know it's pretty cold in the storm. I might be coughing a little bit. Here we go. So I started about 8 years ago, and it was all kind of an accident. I was working at with folks, team members, and ARCA students on a on a collaborative project at Peckham in Lansing, and it's a manufacturing facility that manufactures at the time high-tech undergarments for the U.S. military, and they employ refugees and people with impairments. Long story short, I was there for about 4 years working on this art installation with in an art studio, and that's a whole separate project that I'm trying not to get into right now because of time. But fast forward, there was somebody there who was working with adjudicated youth, and I wasn't working with that person, but they were on another floor, and they left Peckham because they got a job as a supervisor at the Ingham County Youth Center. That's a really nice way of saying a jail for juveniles. So she knew of my work, and she invited me she sent me an email saying, "Hey, Guillermo, I know you're really busy at Peckham, but I'm here at the Ingham County Detention Center, and I was wondering if you could just come over and look at some sketchbooks, visit with the kids here, listen to some poems." And anyway, I reluctantly agreed because I just didn't know what I was getting myself into, but I went, and it changed my my work and my life, frankly. And I remember I couldn't sleep that night. She took me cell to cell, and and she brought out each detained young person one by one to meet with me, and I would look at sketchbooks, comment, listen to poems, and fast forward, I decided to invite some of my ARCA students to do a Tuesday night creative workshop. So it was like an open studio situation. We didn't want to go in teaching. We wanted to bring art supplies with us, bring art ideas, and just jam on a Tuesday night, because it was pretty boring in there, especially because they just removed computers because the staff was having trouble with the young people hacking the and getting past the firewalls and stuff like that. So there was really nothing to do there in the evening. So the art workshops were a good thing. Anyway, so we were doing that for a while, and then a colleague of mine, Professor Anita Skeen, who's now retired at ARCA, she was a director of the Center for Poetry, and she received a letter from an incarcerated man at a facility in Ionia, and she lost the letter. It fell. She didn't open the letter, but the letter she received from the incarcerated man fell behind her desk. And like maybe a couple years later, when she moved offices, she discovered it, opened it, read it, and then knew that I was working with detained juveniles, so she thought I might be interested. And I went ahead and answered the letter by way of contacting the prison staff about this request for an MSU professor to come and teach a poetry workshop in a prison. It was, like a one-shot deal. This individual just wanted someone to come and do a workshop, right? So I went, and I got sucked into this by the warden and the staff, and I met some of the incarcerated folks who were interested in developing a poetry program in the prison. And I'd like to share with you a video that ended up of the program when it grew to becoming this kind of established regular thing that we were doing with our ARCA students. And that meant that I developed a course where ARCA students and I would go to now it was, I think, 6 prisons total. We were collaborating with staff and incarcerated writers doing these workshops, and it turned into poetry slam. So the Lansing State Journal ended up doing a major story about, it was going to be a front page story, but the Nassar story verdict hijacked our story, and we ended up inside, but still a pretty nice spread. So I'm going to share that video with you because I think it does a good job of kind of just kind of summarizing what we do at ARCA in this partnership with incarcerated communities. So here we go. Y'all with me? Yeah. All right. Share screen. All right. Do you see the Lansing State Journal? Can I get I can't see your faces. Can I get a verbal?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And in the silence of an explosion, he swallowed a bullet. After years of struggle, his demons finally won. When God stole the life of my mother's firstborn son.
Oh, sorry about that.
She could barely speak when she told.
There's a commercial there, right? Do you see this commercial here? I gotta bypass it. I don't know what's going on here. I'm sorry, folks. Damn, Lansing State Journal. Come on. I don't know why it was playing two videos, oops, at the same time. Usually I don't have this problem. Anyway, while I'm doing this, I'm zooming in from Chicago and we had a big snowstorm. I assume y'all had the same storm come at you. All right, here we go, close.
Hey, Guillermo, this is Marcia. If you still have troubles, if you wanted to send me the link, maybe I could show it. I could try bringing it up.
I think it's going to work now. So
Okay.
Here we go. It's a commercial for Whole Foods. Come on.
And in the silence of an explosion, he swallowed a bullet. After years of struggle, his demons finally won. When God stole the life of my mother's firstborn son. She could barely speak when she told me he had died. I've never seen so much anguish behind those sorrowful eyes. Of that strong-willed woman, so independent, I wish I could take her heart and mend it. I hope she feels my love every time I send it, and if I had her courage, I could do double my sentence. But her tears fall like rain, her pain crashes like thunder.
You know, when you're in prison, you know, things are more rigid. You know, you have a persona and you have a person that you have to be while you're here. And this program, bringing these students in here, it actually allows them to be the person that they really are. Even if it's just for, you know, an hour or two at a time, you get to see who the real person is.
Your addiction to the ignorance of your own voice won't allow you to. Constantly asking, you hear me? You hear me? Question as an interruption. But yeah, I hear you. Talking.
Next time someone tells you, speak up, quiet kids, say this is my voice.
Have in this prison at Richard A. Hanlon. One of the important factors of the class is that it teaches us not to be antisocial and helps brings us out of our shell. So what I learned is that poetic expression is unique, it's beautiful, and it can actually be a healing process for everybody that's involved. So you write and other people are attentive to listen to what it is that you're writing. And Professor Delgado, this warden at this facility, Dwayne Burton, and all of the faculty members making this possible is a tremendous help for all of us.
And I mean, there's nothing like watching someone perform poetry for the first time. And for, I think, a lot of the people in this class, it was their first time. And that's such a special moment. So being there to not only watch the performance, but to write with these people and sort of take part in the creative process together was so incredibly special. And
I like to say that they'll never forget the experience if they do it, even if they're scared. You'll come back, you'll come out of this changed. is just what one of the resident poets just told me, that he enjoys us immensely. And this is also coming from the other guys, this sentiment, because we talk to them like normal people. We work together. We're going through the same struggles in our writing. It's not top down, it's horizontal. We're writing poetry as a community. So we are learning alongside them. We're not the holders of the knowledge. The knowledge is in the room. So, am I back? Yeah. Okay. Anyway, sorry, that video is continuing here. So fast forward from that, we ended up. I think at the time we were only at, when that video was created, in 2 facilities, and then we ended up in 6, almost 7. So it's just growing. I have to turn down requests to be in more facilities, because we just, there's only one of me in one of my classes. So my hope is that more people in the state of Michigan, especially at Michigan State University, will I'm preaching now, we'll get involved in this work. Yeah, because it's close to home. It's happening right here in our state. I'd like to talk a little bit about how it has evolved, especially considering the pandemic. We were going to all these different facilities pre-pandemic, doing this in person. I had transportation. My students and I would go through. It became a regular weekly thing, and then the pandemic hit, and we had to put our heads together to figure out how to do this work, because they don't have access to the internet inside, and we ended up doing this all via email. What I would do is create with my class PDF packets of the assignments and send those out to staff, and then staff would distribute these. And this was really hard for them, because during the pandemic, the prison situation was terrible. It still is still volatile now. I mean, so imagine, yeah, anyway, there's not a lot of transparency there. So I don't want to talk about that because there's not enough time, but it was very difficult for staff to do this work. And they did not have to do this work. Most programs were suspended, but because of the success and the benefits that folks saw in this partnership, the staff did everything they could to make sure to get the packets to the incarcerated writers, and to make this continue to happen. And so yeah, there's some angels in that system, and it's a really hard system. And I can't say there are a lot of angels, because it's just a place of misery. But there are folks who we've worked with over the years who have changed their minds about and their attitudes towards incarcerated people and mass incarceration in the U.S. Because of this program. And then finally, to wrap things up, there was recently a major exhibit at the Broad Art Museum here at MSU, and the zines that were created by my students and incarcerated people were featured in the exhibit. Zines are little magazines, and just little booklets that that you can do anything like make art and put it in there, spread the word about your beliefs, your rants, your poetry, your art. It's a real convenient and portable way to get the word out. And because it involves only paper, it was something that we could do with incarcerated people. There were no danger that we did, because we're so limited with what we can work with. It was a good way to get the poems out of the prison. So yeah, that is the, and that exhibit ended in December. And I'd like to, Kurt, I'm not sure if am I answering these questions
No, you're doing fine. We're going to take up those questions probably a little bit more in the conversation to
Okay,
follow. But this was
cool.
great.
All right,
Thank you, Guillermo. That's
Thanks.
wonderful.
Yeah, see, I'm right on time, 1 minute over.
Yeah, well, that's my job to keep, make sure we're moving here. Let's move on to Professor Peter Glendenning. And Peter, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about this amazing project you've been involved in.
Well, thank you very much, Kurt. I really appreciate the invitation to be here with you all. Can everybody see my screen? Is that up for everyone?
Looks great. Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, there I am. I'm always followed by paparazzi. They somehow seem to find me and want to make my photograph. Okay, that's such a good joke. But as a photographer, I've been at Michigan State University since 1978. It was a very important year for Michigan State University, as well as for me. In March of 1978, the MSU Board of Trustees ordered divestment of stocks for any company doing business in South Africa. And I arrived here in August. The term started in September. And so right from the beginning for me, besides the fact that my father was very excited that I was coming to Michigan State University, first of all, because his son had some gainful employment. Secondarily, because he despised Notre Dame University and was so happy to have me at the university that had beaten Notre Dame in the game of the century for him. For me, that was interesting, but I was really taken by the moral, ethical stance of our Board of Trustees in standing with the people of South Africa. And that was a foundational experience for me at Michigan State. I was so blessed to meet so many people who were involved with that effort and with our FINES African Studies program and center. And I will include Kurt and Marcia in that. John Beck, David Wiley, Jamie Munson, so many others who, forgive me for not naming, but Michigan State University has had an incredible outreach effort to the continent of Africa, as well as the world. And one of the things that pleases me most about my position here at Michigan State is that I am part of a stream of tradition that has continued since 1855 at this very first land grant institution, and part of something that I think is really sets our university apart. And that is right from the beginning, we were intended to be a source of knowledge for the benefit of others, and to take whatever knowledge could be generated through this academic institution, founded as Michigan Agricultural College, and now going from a land grant and a mission primarily in the state of Michigan to serving the world. This didn't just happen recently. It's something that's part of our DNA here. And so the idea of outreach and service is something that I'll call myself a senior faculty member now because I'm a senior citizen, but somebody, that's something that I want to to pass on and really put firmly in the mind of every young new colleague that comes into the Department of Art, History, and Design. And it's the reason that that I've stayed here so long, because there's so many opportunities for us to do this kind of work. In 1999, I was the president of the Photo Imaging Education Association, and we had a journal, and I wrote an article about professional practices for photographers. I was teaching a course, I taught it for 10 years, on business practices essentially for artists. There are too many starving artists out there, not because they're not good artists, but because they don't know beans about business and how to be a successful person, to put a roof over their head and go on vacation and have the finances to buy a house and do other things that are normal for folks in any other profession. And so this was a very important topic for me, for my own students. After the article was published, I got a message from 3 faculty members at 3 different technicons, as they were called at the time, in South Africa, saying, hey, you know, we've been kind of isolated here for a long time. It's 1999, it's 5 years after the transition from apartheid to freedom and democracy, and we'd love to have you come over to talk about these things and kind of update our students as well as our faculty on these topics. We'll pay for your room and board here, but that's about all we can do. So David Wiley, I approached David and he said, here's $500, go for it. And I approached the Hosemaster Turbo Filter Company, which was a manufacturer of a device that I was using for creating photographs, which you'll see in just a second. It's sadly quite out of date now because you can do everything I was doing with this device in Photoshop, darn it. But at the time, it was quite an innovative device. I was doing photographs for automobile companies. I had quite an active commercial photography practice along with my fine artwork. And that company said, sure, we'll give you the money for the airfare and we'll give you one of these devices to go around the country with and demonstrate to professional photographers, because we've only got one in that whole country. And maybe you can show people how cool it is. And so right from the get-go, I think that one of the lessons I've learned in my time at Michigan State University in doing outreach and service work is that we can't just look inwardly, we've got to look outwardly and find partners that might be unexpected, but that can be engaged and could be brought on board to support the efforts that spring from academia and extend out, and realize that the communities we serve probably aren't even recognized by folks that we might deal with in other arenas, but once they identify with them, they can become active supporters. So in South Africa, I did the professional practices workshops. And when I went over, I said, you know, I'm a professor at a research university. I'm an artist. I've got to make some artwork of some sort. I can't just go over there and teach professional practices. That's a nice outreach and service activity. But what else can I do? And I had followed developments in South Africa because right from the get-go, it was part of what I recognized was important at this university. And I knew that the economy back then in 1999 was really going gangbusters. And at the same time, there were people that were becoming involved in various activities and economic activities that had been boxed out of that previously. And so I worked with the professors and the students, and I said, I want to know from the students what they think it means today to be a South African at work. Just leave it straight at that. Let the students define the projects. And these are 3 students, Marilee, Rudy, and Marcia. Actually still in touch with Marcia and Marilee. And I know where Rudy is, but haven't gotten his email address. So we went around for the month that I was there and photographed people doing work. One of them was Joyce Ngale, who was the first woman and the first Black person to be the mayor of Pretoria. Otto Kriega, former drug dealer, who was running a reformed person who was manager of a dance club for Jesus. And so we portrayed him emerging out of the darkness of his past and his psychedelic past, and looking up to heaven with as many peace signs as we could get on his two hands. JP was the head of security for a used spares lot, and used spares means car parts. And he was a tough cookie, wearing the former military tie and a wristwatch covered with a black band, because when he was out fighting probably the ANC and other folks, you had to hide your watch because it might glow and other people might see you. And also David Skosana, he didn't know how old he was, but he was old, and he was still working on the farm every day and preaching on the weekends. And so my work in this initial project was, as my most recent project was, completely collaborative. When I went to South Africa, I knew 3 South Africans, the 3 professors who had invited me there. But I wanted to do something that was responsive to the new South Africa, and that meant being responsive to the young people at that time, and to use whatever talents I could bring to collaborate with them to create portraits that would give evidence of that new South Africa and the old South Africa as well, and the aspirations of the young people for that new republic. So coincidentally, in 1999, the book Letters from Robben Island by Ahmed Kathrada was published by the MSU Press. And Bob Vasson, an English professor, worked very closely with Ahmed Kathrada on that project, and somehow kindly shared my photographs with Ambassador Sheila Sisulu, who was hosting a reception for Mr. Kathrada at the South African Embassy in Washington, DC, and graciously invited me to put those photographs up and have a display at the ambassador's residence, which I did. And the exhibit traveled from there to the consulates in New York and also in Chicago. The picture that you see is a photograph of a cover that comes with Polaroid SX70 film. And for a time, the Polaroid company was out of business, and a group of crazy people with a lot of money bought the last existing Polaroid factory. And they started a company called the Impossible Film Company. And if anybody's ever made a photograph of an SX70, you take the picture and the picture pops out of the front of the camera and develops before your eyes. Well, before that, a black piece of cardboard pops out to cover up the film, to protect it from light. And these Impossible folks decided it would be a good place to put statements by folks related to impossibility. And this one is sitting right here on my desk, as it has for a long, long time. A quote from a very inspirational figure, obviously, Nelson Mandela. And during the period between 1999 and 2018, I maintained relationships with, very strong relationships with faculty and eventually students as well at 2 of the Technicons that I visited. And I always hoped that I'd go back. I thought it maybe as a tourist, if possible, just to visit during the 25th anniversary year of the change of government. I wanted to visit Robben Island. I hoped I would meet Nelson Mandela, which I didn't, but in 1999, of course, he wasn't present or around when I went back eventually, but I thought about him in his bed in Robben Island, and and also sleeping in his bed the night before he was going to give his inaugural address. What the heck do you say? I couldn't have slept that night. But the man came up with an amazing first words to his compatriots. How do you know, you've been imprisoned, now you're the president. What do you say to the people of South Africa? I talked to some folks over there who swore that they were convinced he was going to say, let's kill all the white people, as his very first words. So there was quite a wide range of, thoughts and nervousness and excitement about what he would say, but he proposed this amazing metaphor that no matter what kind of tree you were, in other words, what kind of person you are, as a South African, we've all got our roots in the same soil. Now, the jacaranda trees imported from Europe, the mimosa about as natural to Africa as you can get. And so he was obviously making a statement that he hoped would be a metaphor that influenced the future of that nation. Of course, since then, there are others who have come after him, who've been in various government and other positions that have proposed their own metaphors and had their own influence in the country. One of them was this fellow. Another one was the former CEO of a massive retailer, Marcus Eusts. I'm sorry if I mispronounced his name, but he was somehow unaware of accounting irregularities that caused the destruction of the company and loss of many people's jobs. And former President Jacob Zuma, another person who had his own personal metaphors for his vision of South Africa, and many, many more people on the positive and the negative side of the ledger who have influenced the world that the young people that I worked with and still work with, the Mandela babies, the world that they live in. And so when I arrived there, fully 66% of the population was young people whose formative years were post-1994. I was in South Africa courtesy of the support of the US State Department and the Fulbright Board as a Fulbright Scholar. And I went there to serve and to provide a means through whatever artistic abilities I might have and otherwise, to create something that would really not result from my own impressions whatsoever, but be entirely based on the hopes and realities and experiences of young South Africans. So my questions for them were, as a young South African looking back 25 years at President Mandela's aspirations, at the Republic today, 2019, as it has been formed not only by his hopes, but also by those of others, what are people going to say about you, young person, 25 years from now? And by that, I mean, what are your soil-related metaphors for what you see the country as being? Because your own stance is going to have an impact on what the country is like in 25 years. And the young people then are going to look back at you and say, hey, you know, what did you do? What was your impression? And how did that affect the world that I'm living in? And I asked them to create a soil-related metaphor and to have a person in mind who had a life story that related to that. So I had actually the easy part in the project. It was entirely based initially in my collaborators, the soil-related aspirational metaphors proposed by the young people, a story from the life of the person who they saw as having some connection to that metaphor. And then a collaboration that was engaged between those two folks and me in creating a portrait photograph of that subject in a setting that was collaborative. I lectured at 16 different universities, over 1,000 young people, and 48 of them stepped forward to collaborate with me. So the big question for them is, can this person be trusted? And I think for anybody who's doing outreach where they're interested in serving a community that they're not part of, has to be able to answer that question in the affirmative, and not just answer it, but be convincing. And Kurt asked us a number of questions, and I think that was really the most important one for me to make this work. Could I be the person who was going to collaborate in the truest sense, and in some ways be the minor partner in the collaboration? Because if the project wasn't truly about the aspirations of the young person, then it was worthless. I couldn't go in there, especially as an American, to impose my views about the country and its future. So here we are with one of our subjects, the fellow second from right in the left-hand picture, a singer of Kosa. I can't do the Kosa song, try to do the clicking along with that, Dumza Maswana. And here's the portrait that we made. The young person I worked with was Nabuchle Zumz, excuse me, I can't pronounce her last name, Mazumza. She was from Nelson Mandela University, and her proposed metaphor was, the music of South Africa is like a river that deposits soil evenly along its banks and connects communities. And so the final works are scaled 24 inches on the shortest side. They include the young person's metaphor, their name, the name of the subject, and a story that's translated in English, Afrikaans, Xhosa, and Zulu, 4 of the 11 official languages of South Africa. And there are 50 of them. There's another example. Mrs. Bain supports 6 families with her 1 salary. She works at Pick and Pay as a manager. So we posed her with 6 shopping carts and created a photograph that had a blurriness to it, but also a sharpness to it. And Bridget's metaphor was, in a harsh landscape, just 1 strong tree can provide shelter from heat, cold, rain, and famine for many. I'll just show you a few more. Do we have time, Kurt? I don't want to go too long.
We probably should just wrap up pretty quickly here, but the images are great and the quotes are just so moving.
Well,
So
I'll go.
maybe we'll have a chance to flip through some of them.
I'll hit right to the end and say we'll talk about lessons learned next.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Peter. I didn't mean to rush you through the end there. I think we're just getting to the part that we could spend more time on.
Yeah.
But now let me shift now to Professor Marcia Mcdowell and her project. And Marcia, I'd like you to introduce yourself, and I know you're going to do a land acknowledgement too.
Yes, thanks, Kurt.
Want to kick me off the screen share? Or
Ready?
I'm ready. Yeah, go ahead.
I think you can kick yourself off, Peter.
Oh, I'm trying to. Oh, there I go. Stop share. I always miss that button.
Good.
Sorry about that.
I do want to give a land acknowledgement. It is important to me personally. I think it's important for the university, and it's certainly important for the kinds of work that we do, because as Peter pointed out, 1855 was one marker for the history of MSU, but we always have to be mindful that this land was originally occupied by other people. So let me just acknowledge that Michigan State University occupies the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Anishinaabe, the Three Fires Confederacy of Ojibwa, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. The university resides on land ceded in the 1819 Treaty of Saginaw. I think the presentation today is going to be a little different because I have with me two of the partners on the project that I'm going to be talking about. No, we are going to be talking about. So I'd like to give a shout out just to, so you know who they are, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about some of my ideas about the origins of the project. So Minnie Wabanimki,
hello,
who is a photographer and a member of the Grand Traverse tribe of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians. And she's been a friend for like what we forget, right? How many years? I bet about 25. And then William Johnson. Can you put your hand up? Thank you. He is the interim director of the Zebawing Center for Anishinaabeg Lifeways and Culture up in Mount Pleasant. And the three of us together, and I have to say that Kurt is also a member of our project team, but he's not going to talk today, maybe in the Q&A, but that the three of us, plus Kurt, and a couple more people have been working on a project together for the last couple of years, but we didn't just start the project in the last couple of years. It's actually been incubating for a number of years. So let me just, I'm going to share a screen now and just show a couple of pictures and give a few comments about how MSU, how I've been involved, and then I'm going to turn it over next to Willie, who can talk about really the point of starting for this particular project and why Zebawing, why MSU working together. So let me just share my screen. Hopefully there are no advertisements on it. Let's see. It's coming. All right. Oh, I don't want to try it. Set up. Here we go. So first of all, to introduce myself, I am the Michigan State University professor. I'm also a curator. I have appointments in 4 units. I am a professor in Department of Art History and Design. It's my tenure home. I am in also the Residential College of Arts and Humanities, or ARCA, as Guillermo says, where I had the state program called the Michigan Traditional Arts Program, which, as you can see here, is headquartered at ARCA. It was for many years at the MSU Museum, but in 2020, it moved over to ARCA. And it's a program that aims to advance cross-cultural understanding and equity in a diverse society through the documentation, preservation, and presentation of traditional arts, folk life, and everyday culture in Michigan. There are sister programs like this in almost every state in the nation. There's also a national folk and traditional arts programs, 2 or 3 of them. And so this is an important umbrella that has embraced a number of the activities that I and Kurt have been working on since the late 70s. Officially, the Michigan Traditional Arts Program started, though, in the early 80s. And like I said, it was for many years housed at the MSU Museum, but I have to say that still the activities that are at the museum, because I also am a curator there, have to do with traditional cultures of all peoples in Michigan. And we have worked with a number of artists, community organizers, community activists, community groups for a number of years on a variety of projects. Some of them are field documentation and discovery research. We hold at the MSU Museum the largest collection of documentation of traditional culture in Michigan. Thousands of tape recorded interviews and recordings, field collections, but we also have objects. And because some of our projects were oriented to help sustain traditional arts activities in communities or traditional artists, or to bring spotlight on different artists, we have over the past a number of projects that have been devoted to Indigenous artists. And I'm just throwing up a couple of samples, and in the middle you hear of some of the projects, and in the middle you see one of the porcupine quill box works of art that's in the MSU Museum collection, but it is actually the focus of what we are engaged in as a project together, Minnie, Willie, Kurt, I, and other colleagues. And so just to give you a hint though, some of these projects you'll see right here, the Sisters of the Great Lakes. We actually did a project probably 25 years ago with local Nokomis Learning Center, brought in women, Indigenous artists from around the Great Lakes region for 3 weekends of professional development workshops. It included Yvonne Walker-Keshik as one of those artists. And after the 3 weekends, the women decided that, well, they don't want just a professional development experience. They actually would like some documentation and visibility, like maybe through developing a collection and doing an exhibition, maybe this publication too. So all of the women that were in that project, each of them decided what they wanted to have in a collection. With Kellogg funding, each artist was given funds to create that piece of art. Yvonne Walker-Keshik made this piece, and then that whole collection, called Sisters of the Great Lakes Collection, is housed at the Michigan State University Museum in a case together, which was the wish of the artists, that their objects would live together. We circulated a traveling exhibit for them. We worked with each of the artists to create a statement about their work and printed in this publication called Sisters of the Great Lakes. So that was one project. We also, through the Michigan Traditional Arts Program, have 2 long-standing programs. One is called the Michigan Heritage Awards, and every year community members nominate somebody in their community, however you want to define that community, who they think exemplifies a deep commitment to perpetuating a traditional art or skill or form of knowledge, and who is excellent in their own work. And one of the years, Yvonne Walker-Keshik again, was nominated and she was given this award. We went on to help work with community members to nominate her for a National Heritage Award that was given by the National Endowment for the Arts. And we have done that for a number of other traditional artists in the state. So then more recently, and I'll show you a couple more slides, and then I'll turn it over to Willie, is we've been focusing on the quill work. We have worked with so many quill work artists over the years and acquired pieces from them that we have this lovely collection at Michigan State. And then a donation of over 100 pieces was given to the MSU Museum a few years ago. So we actually have a fabulous study collection. So what we've been trying to do is what we call animate that collection by bringing in elders, porcupine quill workers, having them look at the pieces, provide more information for us to add to the cataloging information, but also for them to use as study specimens for themselves to see like what kind of designs a particular ancestor was using. So we've worked with the Great Lakes Research Alliance. We work with anthropologists on campus. We work with quill workers. Now let me just go to the next one. And I'll just show you, here's how they're stored. You can get a sense of how many we have. And let's see. Several cabinets full of these amazing pieces of artwork. Oh, and there's the Sisters of the Great Lakes cabinet. And then just give you a sense, like behind the scenes, this is what collection data shows on it, our records keep. And then more recently, and this was part of the project that we're now intensely working on, is that we're trying to make those collections more visible to the communities from which they came. And recently, as part of the Porcupine Quill Work project, we worked with the Ojibwa Cultural Foundation, and myself and a collection manager sat in East Lansing in the collections that you just saw, and with a group of elders and porcupine quill workers up on Manitoulin Island, we would hold up to the Zoom screen a piece of porcupine quill work, and then Minnie was in the room up there, and she and other people in the room on Manitoulin Island would say, oh, turn this over, we'd like to see the bottom, we want to see the edge of it. Or we would hear in the background people going, oh my, that was made by my aunt, that was made by my mother, or I know that design. And so because of Zoom and because of COVID, it prompted us to do that kind of virtual program, but we realized that that's an important new way of us connecting the collections with the communities from whence they came. That's this last slide I'm going to show, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And that is more or less to give you a sense of why MSU is involved in this. And so now, Willie, I'm throwing the baton to you. And maybe you could say like what triggered this particular next step of project partnership.
Yeah, for sure. I would love to help out this morning. But first of all, let me just start with a basic introduction in Anishinaabe Mawin. I'd like to introduce myself in the language. So Nindawe Maganadu, all my relations, Makade, Wase, Yamagunts, Nadishnakas, little black, shiny light, prismatic stone I am, little black diamond I am. Ojibwe Anishinaabe, Ojibwe Anishinaabe I am. Makwa and Dodem, Bear Clan I am. Saginaw Aking Indon Jiba. I'm from the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan. So my name is William Johnson, and I'm the interim director of the Cywink Center of Anishinaabe Culture in Lifeways in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. We're an entity of the Saginaw Chippewa Indian Tribe of Michigan, And I'm very happy to be with everybody in regard to the creative conversations that we're having today. And I wrote it down funny. I said, it's a panel on the virtual arts. And I said, hey, wait a minute, that don't look right. I think it's the visual art, so I better get that straight. One of the things I'd like to say before I get started is, Guillermo's presentation was very inspiring for me. I sat alone in Washington, D.C., of all places, at local Barnes and Nobles, where I attended a spoken word, what do they call that, Guillermo? The poetry jam or poetry slam.
Poetry slam.
Yeah, so I attended one in Washington, D.C., all by myself, with no one to accompany me, because I have a love for the spoken word. And it was amazing. I just loved it. But one of the things that I realized about spoken word and poetry slams is, of course, I've always connected jazz music and freeform jazz and progressive rock music and lyrics of progressive rock music with what eventually became rap music and then spoken word. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of information, and I'm hoping that you'll take advantage of it. Look up the song, The Revealing Science of God by the progressive rock band Yes. And that captures a lot of the progressive rock movement of the time. And then, of course, John Anderson, the lead singer of Yes, was very much into spoken word and creating lyrics based on their rhythmic qualities versus their actual meaning and stuff too. So look up The Revealing Science of God by Yes, and then Peter, of course, he had beautiful presentation too. And we're always inspired by what our friends are doing, artistically and promoting the arts and stuff. So Peter, I'm going to go home and I'm going to snap a photograph in your honor today. I'll take my little camera, with my cell phone, and I'll compose me a real cool picture. And growing up in Bay City, Michigan, Bay City Central High School, where I went to school, I had 4 years of photojournalism. And so I always had a camera in my face, and, I was fond of this Pentax 35 millimeter camera, got really good at it, and then, took pictures for the yearbook and stuff. And so one of the cool things in the photographic world, of course, is that Man Ray photograph that's about to sell for millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars and stuff. So always loved, photography and the special stories that, can be told from a simple photograph. And so, Peter, thank you for all that inspiration today, especially with all those students that you work with. And then we'll use that as fuel for our fire in regard to the Anishinaabe Cool Work project. And so with that, Marcia was hopeful that we'd begin to talk about a little about, how the project kind of evolved. And we can certainly talk about that. That's easy, But as a precursor to that, my father died when I was only 3 years old. And so I recently told Minnie this story. And I was just a little boy, and I was without my father, but I was with an amazingly nurturing mother and 4 older sisters. And so I was nurtured in the best possible way with all these strong women in my life. And since then, my life hasn't really changed. And so our former director, Bonnie Mcdowell and Shannon Martin have kind of picked up, where my mom and my older sisters left off in my professional life, and have kind of nurtured me to kind of share Anishinaabe art and culture with the world. And, without all these beautiful women in my life, it would be, kind of hard to be the guy that I turned out to be. And, just with an amazing love for the culture ever since I was a little boy. And I'm going to show you a quick picture. I love this picture. We can see if we can see that.
Mm-hmm.
And there I am at 10 years old, in the pages of the Bay City Times, learning about my culture, sharing it with others, and especially later as I was growing up as a young man and a teenager with the Title IV American Indian Education Program and the Thunderbird American Indian Dancers. And we would be able to effectuate change within the Bay City public school system for all the Indian students that attended, and then also providing cultural education to all the people throughout the state of Michigan at various events and annual events and little smaller gatherings and stuff, sharing authentic Anishinaabe dances with the people. And that's kind of how I started. And then I morphed into being a curator at the Bay County Historical Society Museum at the tender age of 15 years old. I was only 15 years old. I was just a kid with the Bay County Historical Society Museum. I was assistant to the curator, Glenda Kraft, another amazing woman who took me under her belt and really began to steer me and mentor me and focus me in regard to culture preservation and sharing it with the world and being a curator, you know, and the history bug bit me early, which was a blood-stained piece of Abraham Lincoln's wife. What was his wife's name? I'm forgetting right off the top.
Mary Todd.
Yeah, Mary Todd Lincoln. The Bay County Historical Society Museum had a small piece of Mary Todd Lincoln's dress with the bloodstains of Abraham Lincoln on it. And then once I saw that, I was hooked. And so, you know, the history bug hasn't went away. Cultural preservation hasn't went away. Historic preservation hasn't went away. And then, of course, you know, here I am almost 24 years later with the Cywink Center. And I'm kind of the lone wolf. I'm the last remaining employee from the days when we began to conceptually design the Cywink Center, going through the design development phases of the Cywink Center, the fabrication of the exhibits, and the construction of the building. And I'm the last remaining piece to that puzzle. So I take it very seriously that I'm still able to help out and have a lot of confidence in me through the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Council and Saginaw Chippewa Tribal Administration. And so, yeah, so enough of that, but that'll get us started. So the reason why I was kind of bringing all this beautiful attention to all these lovely women in my life that have kind of steered me in the right direction and provided the inspiration for me to kind of continue with what we do. Shannon Martin is our former director here at Cywink. And we were kind of like two little Anishinaabe peas in the pod, Shannon and myself, kind of cut from the same cloth, raised within the culture, taught to be proud of who we are and where we come from and to share it with everybody as best as we can, kind of like little ambassadors, you know, putting a face to the Anishinaabe culture. And that's the kind of little role that Shannon and myself have grown up with. And we got, you know, quite good at it. And we're still good at it, and we attempt to be good at it. And we're appreciative of those who, are our project partners. So, you know, Shannon and myself, we would often have these, you know, beautiful conversations, you know, in regard to art preservation and cultural preservation. And you know, these things happen very organically, but, you know, much like Guillermo and Peter were saying, you know, sometimes it starts off with a simple conversation. We know the Saginaw Chippewa tribal community so well, and we know where their cultural education is lacking, especially when it comes in regard to the appreciation of tribal art. And so Shannon and myself were just kicking it around one day. I still remember it. And is you know, well, what do you think we should do, Willie? You know, like, you know, we have to present some information to the community. And so, okay, great. You know, let's consider, you know, a quill work workshop with Yvonne Walker-Kijik, our old friend. And we were able to do that in 2015. We had an artist in residence workshop where we bought Yvonne and you know, she was able to educate the next generation of quill workers. And so it was very, very awesome to be able to just have simple conversation And then of course, the conversation probably morphed into, we probably should, consider working with MSU Museum. And then of course, Marcia, with the kind heart that she has, reaching out to Shannon as a part of the Michigan Traditional Arts and Apprenticeship Program to be on the review committee to help with the bettering that situation with working with master artists and apprentices. And so Shannon, did that for a year or so. And then I was asked to do the same. And oh my God, I was so thrilled to be able to help out that way at MSU Museum as a part of the Michigan Traditional Arts and Apprenticeship Program. And just being able to kind of appreciate that level of skilled artistic endeavors and being able to have someone absorb from a master and then be able to kind of communicate it for future generations. Man, what a thrill. And so, my wife, Darlene, and my son, Ian, would always ask me, Dad, when is the next time are we going to go to MSU Museum? And they were always so thrilled because I was in that position of being able to kind of nurture the next level of cultural transference, artistic transference. And so I've always been very thankful for Kurt and Marcia in my life and stuff. And then look where it's taking us today, having this beautiful discussion about the Anishinaabe Quill Work Project. So of course, we had to morph out to the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, which we have great friends there, beautiful friends. Cindy Winslow was our main contact at the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians Iyawing Museum. And if you've never been there, you're in for a real treat. Oh my God, they're right on the bay and the beautiful water. And every time I go there, I get really jealous and think that perhaps, the Zebowing Center should have a enormous bay and lake, side, beautiful water and stuff. So, and it's true. I'm telling you the truth. I get really jealous that, their tribal museum is in such a beautiful location. So we were attempting to get a hold of Cindy Winslow. She signed on to the Institute of Museum Library Services grant that we're participating in. But then, of course, we lost her. And then we had a new leadership come through the Grand Traverse Band. And that's Isidore Toulouse and Sammy Dial. Wonderful, beautiful friends that we're beginning to know a little bit better as we move forward with our project. And then also reaching out to the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation. I have to talk about the amazing, beautiful gentleman, Mr. Michael Cywink. He was their curator, and he would come from all the way up north to the Mount Pleasant area to lecture about the quill works that we would put on display. An amazing man. Tons of cultural knowledge, especially in regard to Anishinaabe quill work. And he would just come and just, work with our tribal artists that are semi-well known for their art, their Anishinaabe quill work. And then he would just provide so much love and enthusiasm and inspiration for us. And I just cannot say so much about Michael. And I kind of lost track of him, and maybe someday our paths will cross again. But Michael Cywink from the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation was just an amazing, beautiful man, much like all of us, that care about art and sharing it with others and providing a decent place for people to come and appreciate these beautiful things. Because time and time again, we have always said that there's a mean old world out there, and it starts right at the edge of our outside door, but we are not a part of that. So,
Willie,
thank you.
Willie, Mike, I
Yes.
would like to segue just
Yes,
to
please.
May.
Yep. Once I get on a roll, please segue. I'm trying to be enthusiastic here, Marcia.
Yeah, I know. And actually, you should all know that Willie is a phenomenal storyteller.
Yeah. So segue, please.
Thanks. So what I'm going to ask Minnie to do, we've already had this little discussion via email beforehand, but make it to another personal level as and this would bring us into some discussion then afterwards of what are the mutually beneficial outcomes or lessons learned or challenges that we've encountered in this kind of collaborative work between MSU people and people that are outside of the MSU circle. Well, although now we're sort of creating circles of people that are interconnected. So Minnie, what has it meant to you to be involved in this project, this Porcupine Quill Work project?
This is just a really, excuse me, great opportunity. I see it as coming full circle in my life because I'm an elder now. And I have been doing photo work most of my life. And I just, first of all, I'm dazzled by all the talent that I'm seeing here on screen. And Peter, your images were just amazing. And back in the day when I worked at the Record Eagle as a darkroom tech and eventually a photographer, we used to call those environmental portraits, and they're just amazing. And now that I'm working on this project, and I have worked on several with Marcia, I just feel blessed being Native American. First of all, that is the greatest advantage because I can go into Indian country with camera and no one pays too much attention to me. And I'm able to just shoot what I see. And that's really been a blessing. And I love to be able to see the Indian country and get that on in digital form and to show and share and be able to let someone see something in Indian country that they wouldn't otherwise be able to see, because Indian people are really private people and they're hesitant and they're sometimes, in fact, I met a family up in Canada that were real hesitant and were real weary, real almost frightened by having to sign documents and, share this information. But in talking to them and telling them what I was doing, they said, yes, you're doing a good thing. And that's what I come to in Indian country. People appreciate what I'm doing. Marcia, MSU, I love them. I've worked for them for quite some time now. And just be able to shoot photographs and now learning and shooting video and trying to portray Indian country so that people can see what is happening and see a world that they wouldn't otherwise see. I'm just really blessed, and especially blessed to work with Isidore Toulouse and Pat Osawamik, who are the translators for a video that I shoot in Anishinaabe. I have them translate for me so that I can transcribe them in the video work that I'm doing. But I certainly wish I had been able to show you some of the work that is coming, but you will see it, and it's just an amazing opportunity.
Maybe I could read, Kurt's sending me some notes saying we're running out of time, but I maybe I could capture a couple of things that in particular I know that have come out of this project. One is that we knew that there were challenges working in the time of COVID, but just like my example of the sharing the collections via Zoom, we have found some surprising, new techniques that will probably be carrying forward. We definitely need to go back to the person-to-person field work in real-time situation, but there are some other things that we've learned. We also know that we have had changes of personnel. Willie already said, described some changes of personnel in the project. So you have to have a large enough group of people so that you can continue the project with, and have other team members be able to step in. And I think Minnie, you've mentioned the language. the Anishinaabewim, we're already seeing potential out, well, not only potential, we're seeing in real time outputs of language preservation and communication, and that we are now connecting those to MSU's Mellon-funded Anishinaabewim project. And, you know, it's just the synergy and the circles are growing of the possibilities. So maybe I will just close with one more thing is Minnie grew up in a household where that language was spoken, and then has sort of lost it. Well, her colleagues, Isidore and Pat, are, you know, making her get re-immersed, but she's excited about this project because she remembers phrases and it's coming back. And what a lovely thing to recapture for her own self, her own language.
Right. And I've been to Canada a couple times this year, and it's just, it feels just like going home because I hear the language so much, and people conversing and having coffee and sharing a meal. And it just is so familiar to me, and it feels so wonderful that I just really am working hard trying to at least become conversational. So it's a blessing.
Thank you.
I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you, all of our presenters who are all terrific in there. Each of these is an old, it's like, it's the unraveling of the story of how you started your project, how you got there. And these things never just happen, right? They're built on a number of factors. And I wanted to just ask each of you briefly, as if you know, I heard some words I particularly am interested in. I think our participants today in this conversation, we really want to emphasize the fact that we're trying to foster and showcase equitable partnerships. And I think each of you has conveyed that, how we connect with the community, how the community's needs and interests are, we knit together something. And there were a couple of key words, and I'm going to ask each of you to share as briefly as you can a key word or something that that you felt has been critical to your success. You know, Peter used the word early on, trust, how critical it was to build trust. I also have heard the term that so much of this work is organic. In other words, you don't know when you start where you're going, but you have, obviously all three of you have a comfort level to let it flow, learn from one another, and that's a remarkable and healthy way to go forward. Also, you know, terms like I heard people using synergies. There were things that you just didn't think would happen, or things that kind of flowed together. Also, circles, kept a number of references to circles of people, circles of how the way you envision the project, and also circles that keep growing was also a phrase I heard. But maybe I'll go back to Guillermo. Is there if you had to say in one word or couple of words, what are the key things that you would tell people who were trying to create an equitable partnership that you had to learn? Maybe not always the easy way, maybe the hard way, but that you think you could impart to people who want to do meaningful, equitable, community engaged work?
I think it's important to remember that the knowledge is in the room. It's something that I learned a long time ago from educators who mentored me. And as an educator coming into spaces, that's the thing that I have to remember the most, and that allows all of us to create together and not be a top-down situation.
That's terrific. Peter?
Well, thank you, Kurt. I would say it really helps to have a heart to serve. I think if you go in with the attitude that you're there to get something, you're not going to get it. Certainly not as much as if you went in saying, how can I serve these people? And just that attitude engages, it shines through instantly. And it gives the people that you're there to serve the feeling that they can trust you to serve them. And through that sense of trust that comes from your attitude of service, they will return endless amounts of collaboration, because they view you truly as a partner, as a part of the community. And many of us serve, as I did, communities that they were not part of. And the greatest honor that you can have as someone serving is to be adopted and to be part of that community. And I think, honestly, only through that moment of becoming one with them can you truly bring forward what you're there to do. So if I had to learn anything, it was that. And also pack lightly and expect the unexpected.
That's always good advice. Let's go to our community partners first. Willie, if you had to say it in 1, 2, 3 words, what are the things that go through your mind that you think make equitable partnerships?
Yeah, that one's easy for me. You just got to let people be people. You got to let people be people. And that's simple enough. Guillermo kind of said it when he was presenting. You know, he was talking about these gentlemen that unfortunately are incarcerated for whatever reason. And he said, you know, these people are human. That's what he said. And I was thinking, hey, that's a good idea, or I can appreciate what you're saying there. But you have to let people be people. What is important to them should be important to you. And that's how I operate here at Zebuli. And so whenever the tribal community comes to me with whatever concern they have, if it's important to them, then it's important to me. You have to let people be who they are. And so, yeah, so that's I'll try not to get too long-winded, but that's just me being me, Marcia. That's who I am. And I'm not a storyteller. I'm not a storyteller. You know, just to let people know, the things that I share are infused with the culture, and we're trying to learn from one another. So, you know, I've often heard that, you know, that I tell stories, but it isn't stories. It's being educated in a different way, and indigenous ways of knowing.
Yeah, I like the way you've just talked about about learning from one another, Willie, which you also, I think, embody too. Minnie, do you want to offer a couple of words just of?
One thing that I found in photographing and filming is everyone's willingness to share their knowledge, their language, their ability to tell a story. And that's what I do. I capture that moment and I'll in turn share it, and it just goes on and on and on.
Great, thank you. Marcia.
I would say maybe, you know, certainly I agree with all of what has been said, but I would add communication, like dedicated to constantly talking through things. And if there are problems or the hiccups, that they don't get hidden, but that you talk things through.
Well, how about, you know, maybe we only have a few minutes left. We don't have any questions in the chat at this time that I see. Is there anybody any of our participants here today who would like to say something? If you raise your hand, I'll try to find you and call on you, or maybe you just have to jump in. Don't be shy. Comment. Bert. You're muted, Bert.
Thank you all for being here. It's really been very interesting for me. Just one really quick question. Are there particular pieces of advice you'd give to colleagues who are engaging their students with you in these kinds of partnerships about bringing students into that work?
Great question. Thank you, Bert. Who maybe we'll start, Guillermo, or any one of you want to jump in. we probably don't have time for lengthy responses, but
I'll make it quick. I don't say this exactly like this to students, but I think it's important to be humble. And I think the thing that we're trying to learn with our students is to become better listeners. And that's a skill we have to learn and practice. So that's my response.
anyone else want to add to that?
Piece of cake. I just had this conversation with Dr. Beverly A. Smith from the University of Michigan, Flint, and she brought her students to Cywink recently. And they said, Willie, how can we help these young people? And I said, I just came out and told them all, just be kind in your approach. Simple enough.
Anyone else?
From my experience with students in South Africa, so many of them, making it clear to them that their voice is important, which is not often the case in a big lecture hall, and that each individual has something to contribute. And this is sadly part of the educational structure, something that is not often the experience for students. And I think just making that more clear that the project depends on their voice not instantly, but definitely brings them on board and makes the experience valuable for them.
Anybody else on this question, or anybody want to offer another? I'm going to just take a look at, see if anybody else attending has any.
I thought I saw Jan Bryn.
Okay, great.
Yeah. I just
ahead,
first say thank you very much. This has been very inspiring presentation. I loved hearing everything, but I just wanted to point out what really stood out to me is everybody's so real, so passionate, and I could feel that passion and with the creativity of the arts. And so I really appreciate that. But I just, when you said keyword, that's all I could think about was passion and creativity. So I wanted to thank you all for that. And when you work, especially I work with youth and 4-H youth development, and they know when you're not passionate. They know when you're faking it. You can't hide that from them. And when they see that you're real and that passion, I just, thank you.
Great comment. I'm trying to jot down some of these responses. So, and I think those are great examples of the sense of being real and being passionate. These are keys we're trying to impart and share with our colleagues and from one another. We're kind of a learning community. What do we learn from each other that we can all do our work better and our commitment better to working with communities? Anybody else want to have a question or comment? How about anything else from our presenters today as we start to wrap up? Any final thoughts that from any of our presenters today?
Yep, Kurt, if I may, just briefly, I want to interject something that Peter shared. He said the word experience. And whenever I work with students, I always remind them, especially young people that'll come to Cywink and we work with them. I always let them know, don't study me. Don't study me. Come and experience what we're going to do together. And so Peter was talking about experience. And so that's what I always tell our young students that come, don't study me. Come and experience, what we're going to do together.
That might be a great way for us to finish. I want to thank all of our presenters today and all of you who have joined us for this conversation. Obviously, each of these projects, we could talk for a long time about how they started and what they are seeking to accomplish and have accomplished already. But it's really the process that we're trying to look at here, trying to learn from one another. So I hope today was beneficial for you. We're very pleased you joined us. We had a lot, we were pleased with the fact we actually had a long waiting list who wanted to join us. We were trying to restrict the number so we could have some conversation. So I hope this was enriching your life a little bit today. I also just want to call attention to the fact that this is, I said, the first in a series. There'll be an upcoming creative conversation, also looking at the same notions that we're exploring today, how to create equitable arts and cultural community engagement partnerships. Next time, we're probably going to be focusing more on the performing arts, and we're going to be looking at different directions. And down the road, we'd like to focus on the spoken word and also even more and on the written word, because there's so many of our colleagues and communities that are working together doing remarkable work today. So thank you again to our presenters for their time and energy. They're very generous with their time, and I'm sure each one of them would be happy to hear from you if you have specific questions. I can help you find their email if you cannot locate it. Thanks again to everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.
Obama P.
Thank you.